us. Uh,
Oh, don't you have a recording in progress? That
we
means you're
do, we
ready to
do.
rock and
Yes,
roll.
as people come and join us. So, good evening, everybody who's joining us. We'll just give it 30 seconds for everybody to get in and get comfortable. We'll get started.
Get
Um,
a cup of
it,
tea.
yeah. I was running a bit late today, so I haven't got a cup of tea, but I'm I'm hope
I'm stocked up here. Thank you.
yeah
Yeah,
I'm hopeful one's going to arrive mid-session. That's my I keep the fingers crossed.
I'm
It might.
hoping. I'm hoping my dinner does, and then hopefully, Raj, you won't hear me chomping away on me dinner.
Brilliant, brilliant. It's interesting, isn't it? Just we were talking before we started recording about the things we remember, and that human bias of we very easily and quickly move on from good things, but things that don't quite work out or bother us stick in our minds a lot longer, don't they?
What was that thing? Wasn't it? I don't know if it's still true. Wasn't it something like if you had a good experience, someone tells like 8 people or something. If you had a bad experience, they'd say like 27, because everyone likes
Absolutely.
gossiping about something. So
Yeah.
it sort of is very important for your 3 R's,
Yeah.
because the danger is the sort of the distance that travels for miles, doesn't it? And then people just make it up. I think that's
Well,
Yes.
on that note, without wishing to delay the start, last week I went to have a haircut, and the gentleman sitting in the chair next to me spent probably 15 minutes complaining about the quality of his tomato salad at the local restaurant. And right at the end, the barber said to him, "Well, you won't be going there again, will you?" And he goes, "No, it's a good restaurant. We normally go there once a week. We'll still carry on going." But it was the fact that he felt the need to complain,
yeah.
and everybody in the in the vicinity, including myself, heard every graphic detail as to why this tomato salad didn't
Mm.
quite fit the bill.
I wonder
So,
if he told the restaurant. Do you know what I mean? I wonder if there's one day he was a silent objector.
Yeah, it could be. There's lots of those, aren't
Yeah,
there?
there are. Nice little saboteur.
Right, well, I think we should. We're a couple of minutes in. I think we should introduce our guest, get started to make sure that everyone who's joined us gets a maximum amount of time. So, welcome
It's
everybody who's
worthwhile
joined us.
listening to.
It's one of our regular webinars through Fractane Associates. And tonight we have Dr. Raj Rattan, MBE, joining us, dentist, ex-practice owner multiple times, joined the Queen's Honours listing back in 2008 for an MBE for services in dentistry, former advisor
Wow.
to the Department of Health, dental director at Dental Protection, and also a member of the Magic Circle, which links nicely with our topic tonight because he's going to make your complaints disappear like magic. Do you see
Yeah.
what I did there?
Well,
I like that.
very
I like that.
good.
That was a nice one, wasn't it?
Very
So,
good. Yeah,
so
yeah.
tonight
That was
it's
magic.
complaints under the 3 R's. So Raj is going to talk about reputation, risk, and recovery, and talk through why patients complain and identifying the anatomy of a complaint, and then a structure to complaint handling. So Raj is going to take us through a presentation. There'll be time at the end for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, the question and answer box is going to be open. So drop them in there, and we'll pick those up at the end. As usual, Chris and I are going to turn our microphones off and our video off so that you can give Raj your full attention. But we'll come back towards the end. So
And
without further
he's
ado,
more interesting, isn't he, really?
way more interesting.
The
So
legend, I think he
we'll
was said, wasn't he? Someone called him the legend, wasn't it? Manrina called him the legend that is Raj.
and it's an overused term, but not in this case.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So without further ado, Raj, we'll hand over to you, and we'll come back and join you a bit later on. So feel free to share your slides when you're ready.
thank you very
Cheers. Good luck.
much. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. Chris and I, in the last couple of months, we've met a few times over one or two projects we worked on together. It's always a pleasure to join him and Andy. They're tremendous hosts, and they're really good people to have in our profession in terms of the support services that they offer. So the title I was given, I can't remember whether I chose this title or whether I was given it, but it's the 3 R's. We're going to look at reputation, risk, and recovery. And this presentation, ladies and gentlemen, is really informed by 3 sets of experiences, I guess. So firstly, it's my own experience as a practice owner. I had an interest in 3 practices, 2 of which I was a sole owner for. One was fully private, one was a mixed NHS and private practice, which was also a pilot site back in 2010. And the third practice, where I first started my career with a very, very old friend of mine, who's still a great friend, was as an expenditure partner. So I started working at dental protection a day a week in the sort of early 1990s. So with that background, whenever we had issues on the practice, whenever there were complaints, I tended to get involved with them. So I think it's fair to say that over some 30 odd years of practice ownership, I pretty much had a hand in doing responses for each of the complaints we had in the practice. Separately from that, I was working in dental protection a day a week up until 2016. 2016, I became dental director to go from the great Kevin Lewis, who sadly passed away last year. It's a very sad event, very upsetting for those of us that were influenced by him in so many ways. And then did 10 years as dental director, and I've just transitioned now into a slightly different role within NPS, and that is on the global advisor for medical and dental. So one of the things that is interesting about this subject is that when you look at the structures and the regulations in different countries, there are some common themes that come across when it comes to complaints. And the reason that there are common themes in different countries is because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, we are all human beings. And I want to share with you today some information that relates to the psychology of complaints as well. I hope, if you haven't heard me speak on the subject before, I hope that much of the material in this presentation is new. I certainly try and refresh my presentations as often as I can and avoid repetition. So I hope you will find it of interest as we go through. Thank you. So let's just define the title now. So what do we mean by reputation? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds just to read what's on the slide. Yeah. The important thing about reputation is this word believe. Okay, it doesn't actually matter what the reality is. It's what the public and the patients believe or perceive. Risk is anything that can damage that belief or in any other way cause harm to a patient. And the recovery is how we respond to that, how we learn from it, and how we rebuild the reputation when things go wrong. So these are the three areas that I'm going to cover in the presentation with you today over the next sort of 45, 50 minutes. If you have any comments and questions, please make a note of them. I think one of my slides, I think it's my last slide, I've also included my email. So if you have any specific queries or comments to make, or you want any more information on any of the references that I'm using and quoting today, drop me an email. I promise you, you will get a response. Just give me 2 or 3 days to reply. Okay, so there's a wonderful quote here, and this quote doesn't say on the screen. I'm just curious as to whether you might want to dwell on that and just think of the impact that a damaged reputation has. Yeah. And you'll be familiar with the legendary Warren Buffett, the legendary investor. And he runs an investment firm in the US. It's called Berkshire Hathaway. And he famously says to his managers and his portfolio managers, he says, if you lose money, I will forgive you because that can happen in the investment game. But if you cause damage to the reputation of the business, that is actually unforgivable. So he puts the reputation as the number one asset of his business, and that is exactly what I would do. It has more value than the bottom line. Okay? The bottom line is the tangible benefit. The reputation is the intangible asset that never appears on the balance sheet. Okay, now I'm going to quote here for you a business model, and those of you that have heard me speak before will know that I'm very fond of looking at models that are applied in the wider business world and then adapting them to dentistry. It's really how I've run my practices over the years and how I've introduced new ways of doing things. So the Harris-Foreman reputation quotient contains 6 elements, and you can read the slide for yourself there. And some of the country's largest companies and organizations use this quotient to measure aspects of their reputation. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that on the screen for a moment, just so you can see and read the bullet points.
Raj,
Yes.
you might want to, at the moment, you're in presenter view. So that means your slide you're looking at is quite small, and we can see your next slide.
Okay, so
just go to slideshow, and then it'll make that slide bigger.
Okay.
Or it should do.
So I need to stop sharing notes for a second.
Yeah, and just then go to slideshow. It's just I'm looking at my iPad and my eyes.
Let me go back, Chris. So
yeah, and then go into slides. Go to slideshow and start slideshow.
I think you might still get my presenter view. Are you getting it there?
Yeah, I can still see it. Don't worry. I was only trying to make it so it's bigger.
I can untick presenter view here. That's probably the way to do it. Let me untick it there, and we'll go again. Is that any better?
No, it hasn't done anything at all. That's strange. Oh, I'll just go back to what you were. Yeah, it's just strange. Yeah.
So what are you seeing at the moment?
I'm seeing your slides down the left-hand side and your slide. If anything, that's a little bit better, but because the slide's a bit bigger. But anyway, yeah, that'll do. If you can't get rid of it and just do it as a slideshow, then you might as well go with that. At least we can't see your notes.
Yeah, I tend not to make notes actually, Chris. So shall I come out of this and re-log on? Is that okay for a moment?
Yeah, that's fine by me. And so it's only the fact of I didn't know whether people be able to see it. That was all.
Okay. I'm sorry about the interruption, ladies and gentlemen. Let me log in again and see if I can change what we're doing.
Oh, hello. Look at that. So we can see you in much clearer detail now. For sure.
I'm sure we can tread water while Raj reloads his presentation. I was just saying, I'm not sure, because we're panelists, I'm not sure whether we see it slightly different to the delegates. But just thinking back to what Raj was saying about that thing about the time it takes to build a reputation, but how quickly it gets destroyed. I think that if you can keep that thought in your mind, it certainly does mean you'll think about how you do things and the future impact it has on your reputation.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's that. What is it? That it's not a dog is not just for Christmas; it's for life. It's a bit like that. If you're not careful, you end up damaging your reputation for something poor or cheap or whatever. Oh, Raj just disappeared. He'll be back again in a minute. I think.
I'm sure he'll be back in a second. But it's a bit like you were saying about that complaint. Well, that kind of mild moaning about that tomato salad, the story that Raj was telling, and the bit that you said about, I wonder if he told the restaurant. And I think that's the problem with grumbles generally, isn't it? That very often you don't go back to the person that really needs to know. You go and tell other people. and then those people tell other people. So suddenly you've got this ripple effect of grumbles going on about your business in the background that you don't hear and you have no control over.
And it becomes a bit of a groundswell if you're not careful, doesn't it? Because then also you've got, if you hear, I suppose it's that thing is if you hear one bad story and then slowly someone else tells a not so great story and then another not great so great story, that you end up with, if you're not careful, a cumulative effect of people just telling you. You end up then with that sort of thing. Oh well, that's rubbish. I mean, there's a restaurant down the road, and it was brilliant. Then it became rubbish, but people remember it not being very good, and therefore people don't go. It's
turning that round.
It's that, and how do you turn that reputation round? Because it's really tricky, isn't it?
But also there's bias as well, isn't there? Because sometimes you go looking for feedback or Google reviews on something because you might have an inkling or you might have heard that there isn't something good about it.
Yeah.
So you then dreadfully you get drawn to those reviews which are negative because that's kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for your thought to be reinforced by the reviews. So and it's one of those things, isn't it? Reputation. We can't tell people we're good. Reputation is something that's kind of outside of us that gets set by the market, doesn't it?
It does, yes. And people are inclined to moan.
No, I think it's a national pastime. I think if they had the moaning Olympics, I think as a nation, I think we do quite well. No, we would.
It's a bit like the weather, isn't it? Really, people aren't really very happy if the weather's really lovely. They're sort of, I don't know, they've not got really anything to say. They prefer to show the weather's cold or it's raining or whatever. But the reputation thing is, hello, Raj, we can see you, so that's good. Oh, he's gone again.
Well, in other news, my cup of tea turned up.
Excellent, good result. I've drunk mine, so hopefully everyone else.
Which is good news.
Yeah. I'm sure he'll get it sorted. The worst case is he goes back to presenter view. It was only the fact of it's really quite small. If you're watching it on an iPad, or especially if you're watching it on your phone, it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I just find that whole the way that we are in terms of how we think. And I mean, I suppose a lot of this, and I'm sure Raj is going to cover this when he talks. It centres around communication, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you get that, good from the beginning, so much just smoothly falls from that. If there's gaps in information and communication.
And I think also it's that other thing is that I know we talked about people don't tell as many people about good things, but the answer is they do tell good things. So once you start, the answer is it sort of enables you to actually try and if you could do something impressive for some people, then it works.
Yeah.
Oh, is that any better now?
Yeah,
that's good. That's better, Raj.
The slide. Yeah, you can see that. You can see that slide better now. Yeah, that's much better.
That's great. That's we will slip back into the background and we'll leave you to.
Okay, my apologies for that.
That's all right. It was only it was only for me, Raj, because I was looking at it and I was having to keep pinching the slide out, and I just thought it seems a bit of a shame, really, because I know that your presentations and what you've got to say is brilliant.
Thank you for understanding. After we've finished today, I'll have a look to see what went wrong there. So, in the spirit of learning from mistakes. So, if anybody feels like complaining, I'll use the framework that I'm going to introduce later on to respond to your complaints about the delayed start. Okay, so bear with me. Okay. So we were talking about the 6 dimensions of reputation. I was saying that a lot of big companies use these as a framework for assessing the reputation that they actually have in their marketplace. Okay, so just as a kind of as a guide, so what I've done is as a separate exercise. I use that framework, and I can send you more details of how it works. And if you want to do the same exercise in your own practice, broke down the 6 elements into subdivisions, and these are the subdivisions. and then did a self-assessment exercise on myself in my main practice to see what we could do in order to build a reputation of the business a little bit more. And these were the areas that we felt we needed to do more work on. So there's some real value here. Now, the reason why this is very important is because as clinicians, we tend to focus on the clinical aspects of care when we're looking at the reputation of the practice. But if you look at what happens in the outside world, take, for example, the airline industry. You know, when you take a flight with a particular airline, you take off, you travel, you land, and somebody says to you afterwards, do you always travel with that particular airline? And you may say, yes, it's my favorite airline, it's my preferred choice, because they have a great reputation in your mind. Your perception of that airline is it's a great airline. But at no point in drawing that conclusion have you ever checked on the pilot's credentials, okay? Because as a passenger, you assume that the airline pilot is qualified to fly the plane safely and has the necessary competencies to make it a safe flight and can take off, travel, and land. Similarly, patients, if you're the dentist, patients will expect a baseline level of understanding and competence. So we can do our job really, really well. We can undertake painless dentistry, and yes, it may slightly help create a reputation, but there's all these different facets that actually go into reputation of the actual business. And the reason why I'm really passionate about this is because in 27, 28 years of ownership of the main practice, we achieved more or less continuous growth over those years. When I started there, we were working there sort of 2 mornings a week. And I think when I left it, it was a 7-surgery practice. It's since grown to 8 surgeries in an area which is very densely populated with many other practices. And we did very little advertising, minimal advertising. It was largely done word of mouth. And word of mouth marketing relies very heavily on the reputation of the business. So my personal view is that I don't think we pay enough attention to the reputation of the business. We attach a lot of significance to the financial metrics, but not enough attention to what I think is even more important than the numbers, and that is the reputation of the business. So if you put all of this together into an equation, again, those of you that have heard me present before will know I'm quite fond of trying to put everything into single slides. The reputation of the business is everything you see there. You've got the numerators of clinical quality, patient experience, and trust, and the denominators, the things that drive the reputation down: clinical error, unmet expectations, and patient complaints. Take that as a equation, and then you multiply it by time and consistency, because each time the patient attends over a period over a certain number of years will add to the reputation. So reputation is a cumulative entity. Now, the more often they come, say to yourself, what was it that we did last time? What can we do this time to improve the reputation that we have for this person? And when the patient buys into your reputation, they will demonstrate what's often described as premium loyalty. When they have premium loyalty to your business, that's when they recommend others. And I'll come back to that towards the end of my presentation today. So, what can we do to protect the reputation? I've gone to great lengths to explain why I think it's very, very important. And there's 6 things we can do. Now, we don't have the time today to cover all 6. This session that I'm doing with you today is kind of a digest of a sort of a half-day course, and so we've had to condense it a little bit. So the areas that I want to cover with you today, we're going to cover 4 out of 6. Okay, we're going to talk about managing expectations, handling complaints, the principle of service recovery, and very, very important, looking after the team. So let's now look at managing expectations. So the difference between what a patient expects to receive in terms of care and experience, and the difference between that and the experience is where the risk resides. Okay, any gap between what they expect and what they actually get is the zone of risk. And what happens is that's where the complaints stem from. Okay, so we're going to have a look at that aspect first of all today. So when we look at experience and expectation, let's now consider the psychological theory behind this. It's often described as the expectation disconfirmation paradigm or theory. And it highlights how expectations prior to purchase and how post-purchase experiences shape patient satisfaction. And there are a number of outcomes when it comes to the disconfirmation between expectation and experience. When the patient's experience matches the expectation, then you get what's called simple confirmation. If this is what the patient said, thought would happen, that's exactly what happened, it's confirmed, simple confirmation. When the experience of attending exceeds the expectation, that's a positive outcome. That's described as positive disconfirmation. So if somebody's attending your practice for example, extraction of an upright 8, they're a bit nervous about it, understandably. The tooth is extracted, the injection is painless, it comes out very easily. You just elevate the tooth out. Patient doesn't even realize the extraction's been done. It's fair to say that their experience is greater than the expectation, and they will feel positive about it. And that's called positive disconfirmation. The flip side is when the experience is less than what they were expecting. And that's when you get negative disconfirmation. And ladies and gentlemen, if I share my personal experiences with you, and I look at all the complaints that we've handled over 30 odd years in the practice, against a number of associates, and again, some against the members of the team, we've had our fair share of complaints over the years. Thankfully, not that many, but we have had them. And I add that experience to what I've done in dental protection over years, helped hundreds of dentists, if not thousands, managing complaints and looking at complaint letters. I will say to you that 90% of complaints are triggered by negative disconfirmation. When the patient's experience did not live up to the expectation. So the first message today is, before you treat a patient, before you do anything invasive, the first thing to say to yourself is, what is the patient expecting today? And to have a conversation with the patient to make sure that the expectations are realistic. I can remember many years ago treating a patient who was the sister of a local, very prominent local individual, and was recommended to me by a member of the family. I hadn't seen them before. Came and said, so "You've been recommended to me. I want my front tooth, my crown changed. I'm getting married over the summer." And I looked at this tooth. I took a radiograph. It was a post crown. I could see all sorts of potential areas of difficulty. And she said, "I don't mind what it costs. I want it to be a perfect match." So you know from that moment onwards, before you do anything at all, you have to make those expectations more realistic. Okay, so I can still remember seeing the first appointment, 30, 40 minutes, discussing the procedure, going over all the things that might not go according to plan and what we will do about it. Okay? So the patient's expectation drops, and then with the aid of a first-class technician that I've worked with for over 20 years, you get the result that the patient hoped for, that I would want to deliver as a clinician, and the patient goes, wow, okay, because the expectation has been tempered and it's been brought down. And the words in the yellow boxes are the things that impact and influence the patient's pre-purchase expectations. So just leave that there for you to read. And the text that's in the pink boxes is the patient's perception of overall value after the encounter. And what the patient is doing in their own mind is balancing up those two. Yeah. But it's not quite as simple as that. And this is where it gets quite interesting, because we use this word all the time. You see it in articles, you see people lecturing and saying, oh, patient expectations are very, very high. Well, there's not just one type of expectation, ladies and gentlemen. There are actually 3 different types of patient expectation. And the work, this work is done by Zeitmal and Bittner, who are very prominent marketing gurus at the time of their research based at the Harvard Business School. So the 3 types of expectation are as follows. Okay, firstly, there's what's called the desired service, the level of service the patient hopes to receive. Okay, and again, you can relate these to the airline industry. You know, what is the level of desired service you would expect from an airline before you go on holiday? Okay, now the patient believes this desired level of service is achievable, hence the can be, but they also feel actually that's how it should be. The next level is what's described as adequate service. The adequate service is the minimum tolerable expectation. In other words, lowest level of acceptable performance. The point at which, if you dip below this, the patient will be unhappy. So what is the minimum tolerable expectation? Then you have what's called a predicted service. This is the level of service that patients believe they are likely to get. And it implies, as the slide says, some objective calculation on the probability of performance. Okay, so if I use myself as an example, my patients, I've seen the same patients for most of them for over 25 years. I still do some clinical sessions, not that many these days, but I'm very keen to continue to work clinically. So I was in my practice last week on Saturday. I've been there again this Saturday. And I'll tell you what my patients will be expecting. The patient will be thinking, Raj should see me on time. Yeah. Adequate service. If he's running 15 or 20 minutes late, that's kind of okay. Predicted service, he will be running late because he's run late for the last 20 years. So why on earth today is the same way to be running on time? Okay. So those are the 3 levels of service. Now, the zone of tolerance is the gap between the desired level of service and what is adequate. Okay, that is the zone within which, if you operate within the zone of tolerance, you are not going to receive a complaint. And that zone of tolerance is different for every single patient. It can be different for the same patient on a different day. Yeah, it can be different for the same patient on a different day, depending on what, you know. So the running late example is a good one. So I can still remember, it upset me so much when this happened. Many, many years ago, I used to start at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. Patient arrives at 8 o'clock. The patient is seen at 7 minutes past. He was absolutely furious that I was running 7 minutes late. But the reason I want the 8 o'clock appointment is because at 8:27, I catch the train from the train station down the road. And on this particular occasion, he's an architect, he's now a retired architect, and he was doing a very big presentation to a hotel group to win a very big contract. And the fact that I was running 7 minutes late meant that he could not, he refused to have his examination because he just couldn't risk missing the train. And I remember him being very angry with me, storming out of my practice. The same gentleman is still a patient today and has a completely different attitude towards what to waiting. Yeah. on a typical Saturday appointment, he will go and buy the weekend FT, he'll get a coffee from Starbucks just up the road, and he'll arrive at the practice 20 minutes early. And he enjoys sitting there, reading his newspaper, having a cup of coffee. It doesn't bother him in the slightest how late in the morning. He chats to the staff, sees how they are. He's known them for a very long time. Okay, now, here's the important thing. The width of that zone of tolerance is inversely proportional to the degree of importance, which is why when patients come and have elective treatment with us, particularly cosmetic interventions, because they want them, they have a very, very narrow zone of tolerance. And the narrower the zone of tolerance, then the more likely that the patient will complain if we slip outside it. So when we talk about patient expectations, what we should really be talking about, ladies and gentlemen, here is the zone of tolerance. It's a more precise way of addressing the situation. And I'll just leave you with contrast theory, which is a fascinating theory. I haven't got time to cover it in any great detail today, but you can look it up afterwards. It's on the screen in front of you right now. Okay. So let's now move on to handling complaints. We've covered managing expectations. We've covered the expectation paradigm, disconfirmation paradigm, and now we're going to look at how we handle complaints. So the theory I want to share with you before we talk about complaints is what's described as Stacey Adams's equity theory. Stacey Adams being the individual who first came up with it. This is a sociological theory. It's nothing to do with dentistry, but it's a psychological theory and a principle that's very, very relevant and applicable to general dental practice. And it's based on the principle that people are motivated to act when they perceive they have been treated unfairly. There is in all of us an innate sense, I think, of what is right and what is wrong. And I think also we have an innate sense of what is fair and what isn't. So let me use an example. I can recall a patient many years ago, buying the patient with some full dentures, complete dentures, and the lower denture, flat bridge, difficult to get that denture to be stable. Patient wasn't happy. They paid their fee, which at the time from memory was about £400, something like that. And the patient came back 2 or 3 times and was clearly not happy. At the time, I wasn't aware of Stacey Adams' equity theory. I wasn't working at Dental Protection, and the patient requested a refund. So I phoned up the indemnity organisation, which happened to be DPL, spoke to a gentleman there who very kindly said, my advice to you is to give the money back. I remember thinking to myself, actually, that's not really what I was hoping to, that's not the advice I was really looking for. I'm a bit disappointed I have to give the money back. I resisted it, but I gave the money back. Many years later, having come across this theory, I completely changed my mind and my attitude towards giving patients refunds. So over the years, I think I've probably done dental refunds to maybe 3 or 4 patients. And there's a pattern. They've all been complete dentures, and they've all been lower dentures being unstable. And apart from that first case and all the other cases, I have offered the refund before the patient has requested it. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you why that is. The reason is because I know, and the theory tells me, that the patient's mind, the patient's brain is saying, it's all right for the dentist. The dentist has got his or her fee, but I haven't got the denture that I want, or the denture that I feel I should receive. That is fundamentally unfair. There's an inequity there that niggles the patient. So before the patient is going to listen to any reasonable argument about why the denture has been so challenging to make, you have to restore equity. And the quickest way you restore equity is by offering a refund. Yeah. So my attitude towards this has changed over the years, and this is what I would certainly this is what I would advise anyone that asks me about a similar situation. I would say to them, number one, restore equity. So I'm going to give you some examples about that as we go through the presentation. Okay. So I'll let you read the quote on the screen. Okay. So the more intense the inequity, the greater the tension and the stronger the motivation to act. And that sentiment was picked up very nicely by a gentleman called Bard Tronwell, who, in my humble opinion, has written a dissertation that's illustrated on the screen in front of you now. This is the finest work I've read on complaints management. It is, I think it was his PhD dissertation. It is a magnificent piece of work. And there is so much, if you can invest the time to go through this and understand it and look at the science behind it, you will change your approach to complaints management in your practice. This has had a huge influence on me, and it features in a lot of my lectures now. And again, the quotes on the screen are taken from the thesis, and we'll let you read those. Okay, so the patient's motivation now is to act in a way that restores equity with the minimum cost. Okay, that's the key. So, how do you respond to the complaint? So this is a model which at some stage I will write up and publish at the moment, currently as it exists today. I haven't written it up, but it's my response model, and it's something which I've created on the back of the experience I've had in dental protection over the years. And again, it's self-explanatory. I'll just give you a few moments to digest the acronym. So it reads from left to right. So recognize, empathize, seek, RES, POND. Again, give you a moment to read the summary. And when you see it on a screen like this, the value of the model doesn't really come across. So if you look, for example, at provide explanation, okay, your explanation to the patient, must not be massaged into a narrative that lets you off the hook. It must be a clear and very honest response. So I'm going to give you an example now of a case which illustrates this point. Many years ago, one of the associates, a very, very talented dentist who since has gone on to do great things, received a patient complaint. He was seeing a lady and providing some new dentures for her. They'd had 4 or 5 visits, and this letter arrives from, and they paid the money for dentures in advance. Letter arrives, it's addressed to me, and the gentleman says, my mother's been a patient in your practice. I'm not happy with the care. I demand, the word was demand, I demand a full refund of fees, and we won't be returning to your practice. No real indication as to why and what had gone wrong. So I spoke to the associate said we've had a few issues, and he mentioned to me what those issues were. So I thought, okay, fair enough. I'm tempted straight away to do the refund. But it niggles me that the patient's son had written in and was not happy. I thought there's more to this than meets the eye. So I rang the patient's son. I said, look, you and I haven't met, we've not spoken. This is who I am. I'm the owner of the practice. Your mother's been seeing one of my colleagues with a practice, and clearly you're not happy. You should by now have received a check that I've sent you as a refund. Do you mind me asking what was it about the service that we were offering that led you to write the letter? And he said, well, I'll tell you straight away. He said, we'd asked for my mother to be seen in the downstairs surgery. She's over 80 years old. She finds it difficult to go up the stairs. On each occasion that she's been, she's had to go up the stairs. Last time when she came to have her dentures sort of, I think he used the word pre-fitted. What he meant was trying, and the work wasn't back from the laboratory. I said, okay, fine. So I made a note of a few scribbles. I said, well, thank you very much. I said, I will look into this. And I looked into it, and everything that the son has said is true. We have processes, as all of you do, to make sure the lab is back, all that sort of thing, but the processes are broken down. And it bothered me that this elderly lady had been so inconvenienced. So we changed a few things in the practice to make sure this didn't happen again. We learned from the experience, we changed some policies and so forth, and those changes are still implemented today, many years after I sold the practice. And then I rang the son back. I said, look, as a result of the conversation I've had with you, I just need to offer you my apologies, because you're absolutely right. We fell below the standard and that you were expecting. And I just wanted you to know we made some changes. Thank you for having the courtesy to speak to me. I hope that your mother will get her treatment elsewhere, and please accept my apologies. So thank you very much for phoning. That was the end of the call. Some 4 or 5 years later, looking down my day list, and there's a name of a patient there who I don't recognize. I don't recognize the name. The gentleman walks in, he says hello, he greets me, he's obviously very nervous. He says, you don't remember me, do you? So I'm really sorry, no, I don't. I'd assumed I'd seen him at maybe an emergency treatment session, which would be emergency registered the weekend, And he said, no, it wasn't an emergency. He said, we haven't actually ever met, but we've spoken. I sent you a letter on behalf of my mother, who was having some dentures. And it then came back to me. I said, oh my goodness, yes, I'll tell her. I said, I do remember. We've spoken a couple of times. He said, yes, we have. I then said, oh, how's your mother? He said, well, I'm sad to tell you that my mother's now passed away. I said, I'm really sorry to hear that. Forgive me for asking. I didn't know. I was just being courteous and asking how she was. No, that's fine. He sat down. He hadn't been to a dentist for over 20 years. To cut a very long story short, he had an implant-based restorative treatment plan, which he accepted without query. I think at the time, his treatment plan we came to about £20,000, which for our practice in that particular location, we didn't do many treatment plans of that value. So this was a big treatment plan. And it's interesting what he said. He said, thank you for your courtesy when you spoke to me that day. He said, I'm very nervous about going to the dentist. But that was the day I knew that when I plucked up the courage to come, you were the dentist I wanted to see. Yeah. And that was a lovely thing for him to say. And he's a patient to this day and has recommended probably 24 patients over the years. All because the empathy, the explanation, and the solution was heartfelt and genuine. And I cannot get across in stronger terms the value and the importance of authenticity when you're dealing with complaints. Yeah, it cannot just be lip service. You have to buy into your response and make sure that it's honest and that it admits errors and failures when those have happened. And what do patients want? There's a number of things they want. These are the 8 R's, if you like, and that's just there for you to glance down and to make sure that when you do the response, so when you apply this model, you make sure that these elements are included. Yeah. So if I take you back to the story that I've just told you, and the way I've told it to you, I hope you will see that when I spoke to the patient, this was a checklist I went through. Yeah. I responded, I explained, I reassured him we've made changes that won't happen again. When the patient came back all those years later, recognized the patient's vulnerability, expressed my regret. And at all times, respected the complainant. That doesn't often happen, right? But you must see it from the patient's perspective. And the other thing I want to also mention now is we talk about complaints, and we have there's a requirement that we have complaints manager and so forth. But in many ways, once things get to a complaint stage, it's almost too late. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. Before the patient verbally or complains, before the patient complains verbally or in writing, right, three things happen. First of all, there are always micro expressions in the face. You know, and I know that you can tell when a patient walks into your surgery if they're not happy about something, or when they walk out if they're not happy. So you have to make sure, my opinion is, you have to make sure that your team are tuned at the front desk to recognize the micro expressions and the facial expressions. And when there is a grumble, that's the stage at which you must get involved. Okay. By the time the complaint comes on in writing, it's almost too late. So yes, we all have a complaints policy, but I have a very simple rule, which is you must address the complaint one stage before. So have a grumble policy. And it's something that I was taught to do, encouraged to do, in the very first practice I ever worked. And our principal said to me, he said, Raj, before you go home in the evening, have a word with Lynn. Lynn was the head receptionist of the practice. Just check with Lynn if all your patients were happy. And I can tell you, all these years later, I cannot walk out of the practice without first checking the reception if everybody I've seen that morning was happy. And if reception say to me, actually, so-and-so wasn't because of this, this, and this, I will call the patient. And I will say to them, I understand that we didn't live up to your expectations today. I'm just ringing to see if there's anything I can do and just to apologize. Because I don't want the patient dwelling on that incident and then having to write in. Okay, so my personal view is to tackle the complaints at a very early stage and deal with them at the grumble stage. Okay, so catch the grumble. The image there, you may not remember the detail of the slide, but you remember the image, yeah? Catch the grumble to avoid the complaint. Okay, so we're nearly at the end now. We're running a little bit late because of the glitch with the slides at the beginning, so forgive me again for that. So service recovery. So this is the third R in the presentation today. So it's called the service recovery paradox. Okay, and it hinges on the idea, as the slide says, that an effective recovery can turn a negative experience into a memorable one. It's best illustrated with the graph. And at the bottom of the slide there are three references for those of you that may want to read up on this in more detail. The blue line represents the line that a patient goes through over a period of time. The loyalty steadily builds over a period of time. They're always happy with the service. It's always positive disconfirmation, and it's ticking along very nicely. The green line is what happens when there's a service failure. The line suddenly dips where you see the exclamation mark, and it's how you deal with the dip. Now, most people, when they encounter a complaint, tend to distance themselves from the complainant. And sometimes we think to ourselves, we're working under very difficult conditions, very challenging times. You can be rushed off your feet. The NHS can give you dilemmas over what treatment you can and can't do, etc., etc., etc. It's a stressful environment. And then when patients complain, well, they're not being very understanding or sympathetic towards the dentist, it can hurt. It always hurts. And it's a natural reaction to want to step away from it. But actually, if you treat that as an opportunity to exercise and to implement service recovery, what happens is that the customers where there's been a service failure and there's been a successful recovery actually end up more loyal. Yeah. So the example I gave you about the patient who had been for 20 years, who wanted a refund, who demanded a refund for his mother, is a classic example of somebody who experienced the green line. Okay, there was a failure. It was dealt with well. It was dealt with sympathetically using the respond model, and basically, as a result of it, that gentleman became a very loyal patient. Premium loyalty, attracting lots of recommendations. And that's why it's called a paradox. That's why it's called service recovery paradox. And if you look at it differently without the graph, this is just another way of expressing the same information, though in a slightly different visual format. And John Shaw, whose work I've read over many years, and I've quoted him in a number of articles and books over the years, he's made a whole career out of implementing service recovery strategies in various businesses. And he says, what service recovery does is it builds loyalty that brings a customer, in our case, a patient, back from the brink of defection. And this zone of defection is illustrated in the graph here. So again, we've got Hesketh, Sasser, Schlesinger, who've worked together many, many years, who came up with the concept of service profit change I'll refer to in a moment. They have this graph, which is, there's a zone of defection, there's a zone of indifference, and then there's a zone of affection. Okay, patients that are grumbling and not happy are in the zone of defection. Yeah, and every practice, it's not necessarily practice. Most practices will have patients who are grumbling about something like that, unless you are very diligent about your reputation. And that goes back to the opening slides. If you work on your reputation, the number of patients that occupy the zone of defection will diminish very rapidly. And that's when you experience the growth. And from the growth, you get the enhanced profits. So focus on reputation and recovery does pay off. I said in my introduction, it's not the most important number, but it translates into a bottom line benefit. And I can say that to you after 30 years of ownership. Yeah, 30 years of ownership, very little advertising, wholly reliant on word of mouth, and pretty much consecutive growth over all those years in an area very densely populated with other practices. So finally, looking after the team. Okay, number 6, but by no means bottom of the list. I mentioned the service profit chain to you. It's one of the most influential textbooks I've ever read. And I thank a very good school friend of mine who is a good friend to this day. He has this habit of buying me a book every year on my birthday. And over the years, I've got 30 or 40 books that he's bought me. This was one of them. This is an absolutely wonderful book. Probably a book that's influenced my approach to the dental business, to the business of dentistry, probably more than any other. Yeah. And the service profit chain basically links a number of different facets of service elements and profit. And it starts at the bottom of the chain. It starts with internal leadership, internal quality, and then the next 3 are all to do with employees. Yeah, I remember, into a wonderful bookshop on Tottenham Court Road called Foyles. I used to go to Foyles every couple of months. I used to just love wandering around and buying books. And there was a book on the shelf there. I remember looking at it and then ignoring it, and then going back a couple of months later, seeing it there again. And the book was called The Customer Comes Second. I thought, well, that title is so intriguing. I have to buy the book, because if the customer comes second, in a world where everybody was saying to me the customer comes first, I want to know, in this author's opinion, if the customer comes second, then who comes first? And the book was written by a gentleman who ran a very successful holidays business in the US. And his basic premise was that your internal team come first. Because if they are happy, they are motivated, employee satisfaction leads to employee loyalty, which leads to employee productivity. Yeah. And I feel so fortunate that we had a team at the practice, some of them are still there, who was with me for, many of them had been employed by us for over 10, 15, 20 years. And the contribution that they made to our business, to the reputation of the business, was absolutely immense. I was only ever there 3 days a week, so it would be wrong for me to lay claim to that it was my influence or my leadership. It wasn't. It was their hard work. If I did anything right, it was treating them well. Yeah, treating them with respect, treating them for the skills, recognizing the skills that they had. So employee well-being, employee safety is a big driver when it comes to reputation of the business, and also when it comes to service recovery. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a bit of a whiz through. I think I've just about managed to finish on time, despite the slightly late start. There's a lot of materials we've covered here. Do email me if you want any more detail on anything, if you have a particular dilemma, or if you're interested in implementing some of the strategies that I've mentioned, because behind the slides, I have a number of Excel spreadsheets that I've used over the years to self-assess things. And I'm a great believer in periodically just taking stock on where the business is and looking at areas that we can improve on. And I'll be very happy now in the next few minutes to answer any questions you may have. And Chris, thank you once again for accommodating the slide delay today.
No, that's brilliant. I like the
Thank you,
fact,
Raj.
I like the idea that it's a continual process rather than sort of like you do one good thing and then you don't ever touch it again. It's this whole thing of continual, isn't it? Like you do one and then you do it again and you review it again and then you improve and evolve. I think it's brilliant. I
think the chief grumble officer. I love the chief grumble officer. And the other thing that I took from this, and what I hope the people that have joined us tonight will do tomorrow, is go back to their teams and share this message with them, because there's no point in us just taking this on board ourselves, because as leaders in our business, or if you're a clinician and locked away in a surgery, you don't have eyes and ears on everything. So it really would be a team effort to make sure that everybody's antenna is up and alert to potential issues, so they can share it with the right person to quash it before it escalates into something more serious.
Yeah, definitely.
That comment, and is a really important comment actually, because I'll share an example with you on that. So I was never at my practice on Fridays, because Fridays was the day that I used to work in vocational training. I ran a VT scheme in North East London for many years. And I remember on one occasion getting a phone call from one of the receptionists about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, who said, "I'm really sorry to bother you, but I thought you would want to know of an incident that happened at the practice." So I said, "Well, okay, what's happening? Is everything okay?" "Oh, everything's fine. One of your patients came in today and they've broken a front tooth. It's been restored, it's been repaired, but the patient wasn't happy, and she, to use a word, grumbled a little bit about the fee at the reception desk." I said, "Okay." And my receptionist said to me, she said, "I know how fussy you are about grumbles. I'm ringing to let you know that one of your patients, in your absence, has grumbled. And the reason I'm letting you know is because I know that you would want to know." So my next question to her was, "Who's the patient? Can you text me the phone number?" And I rang the patient in the evening. Yeah.
Mm.
So even though I wasn't there, the habit that was instilled in me since the age of 23 and a half by my first principal, I rang the patient, we had a chat, I explained to her how the fee was made up. Well, I won't go into the detail of all of that. Anyway, at the end of the conversation, she said, "Thank you so much for phoning." She said, "I was going to write to you, but I won't bother now."
Mm.
Yeah.
Being front foot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that reflects well on the way you would have trained your team, so
Yes.
that they sensed that was happening. But a bit like tonight, Raj, the way you share so much for the profession, it's outstanding. It really is, for the people that have joined us tonight, and generally through your career. When you've got the experience that you've built up, passing that down through the profession, so it stays in good shape. It really is terrific.
Very kind of you. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, he's the
I've,
legend.
I've really enjoyed myself. Like I say, I know we're not, Chris and I, we're not clinical, but we always pick up so much from listening to you, because so much of what you talk about is just good business
Yeah,
sense that can be translated into so many other areas.
yeah, it's nothing to do with dentistry.
No, no, no. Well, no. I mean, in fact, I think I can safely say all the references are in that presentation. Not a single one is from dentistry.
Yeah.
They're all from a wider field. And one of the things I'm looking around to see if there's a copy nearby. One of the journals I've subscribed to for 20 odd years has been the Harvard Business Review. And I can honestly say to you, every issue that comes here and that I read, I end up highlighting something.
Mm.
And there are days when I wish I was still a practice owner, because I would love to implement some of those.
Yeah, I bet. No, brilliant.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, I think we've got to time, Raj. Thank
Yeah,
you very much indeed.
superb
Always
as
appreciate your
always.
time. Always enjoy spending time with you. So thank you for that. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. And then we'll be back next month with a fresh guest, a fresh topic, and keep you entertained and educated.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Raj. Take
Lovely.
care.
Thank you very much
And
indeed,
thanks
everybody.
everybody for joining. That's lovely. Great.
Cheers. Thank you.